I never thought my life would take such a dark turn on that godforsaken night bus traveling from Chicago to Indianapolis. My name is Sarah. I'm 34 years old, and what I'm about to tell you will probably make you question everything you think you know about grief, loneliness, and the desperate choices we make when we're drowning in pain. My husband died 6 months ago. Cancer. The aggressive kind that doesn't give you time to say goodbye properly. One day he was here, complaining about back pain, and 3 months later I was standing at his funeral, wearing a black dress that felt like it was suffocating me, listening to people say things like, "He's in a better place," and "Time heals all wounds." But they were wrong. Time doesn't heal anything. It just teaches you how to function while bleeding internally. That night, I was traveling back from visiting my sister in Chicago. She'd been worried about me, said I looked like a ghost of myself, that I needed to snap out of it and start living again. Easy for her to say. She still had her husband, her kids, her perfect little life in the suburbs. What did I have? An empty house that still smelled like Michael's cologne, bills I could barely afford on my teacher's salary, and a hole in my chest where my heart used to be. The bus station was nearly deserted when I arrived. It was past 11, and the fluorescent lights made everything look sickly and unreal. I bought my ticket from a bored attendant who didn't even look at me, and I walked out to platform 7 where my bus was waiting. Before we go any further, I need you to do something for me. If you're listening to this story and finding yourself caught up in what happened to me, please hit that subscribe button. I'm sharing something incredibly personal here, and your support means everything. It helps me know I'm not alone in this mess. The bus was mostly empty, maybe 10, 12 people scattered throughout. I chose a seat near the back, by the window, where I could lean my head against the cold glass and pretend to sleep. That's what I'd been doing for 6 months. Pretending. Pretending to be okay at work. Pretending to eat. Pretending I wasn't having conversations with my dead husband every night before bed. I didn't notice him at first. The man who got on at the last minute, just as the driver was about to close the doors. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, with dark hair that fell across his forehead, and eyes that looked as haunted as mine felt. He wore a leather jacket despite the warm September night, and he carried nothing but a small backpack. He walked down the aisle slowly, his eyes scanning each row, until he stopped at my seat. "Is anyone sitting here?" His voice was rough, like he'd been shouting or smoking, or maybe just hadn't spoken in days. I shook my head, not trusting my voice, and moved my purse to make room. He sat down, and I caught his scent. Cigarettes, coffee, and something else I couldn't quite place. Something dangerous. The bus pulled out of the station, and the city lights began to blur past my window. I closed my eyes, trying to will myself into unconsciousness, into that blessed state where I didn't have to think about Michael or the empty bed waiting for me at home. But sleep wouldn't come. It never did anymore. "First time on the night bus?" he asked, breaking the silence between us. I opened my eyes and turned to look at him. Up close, I could see he was probably around my age, maybe a little older. There was a scar above his right eyebrow, and his jaw was covered in dark stubble. He looked like someone who'd been through something terrible and survived it, barely. "No," I said quietly. "I take it sometimes when I visit my sister." He nodded, as if this answer told him everything he needed to know about me. "You look sad," he said bluntly, "like someone died." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my throat tighten, felt the tears threatening to come. I turned back to the window, blinking them away. "That's none of your business," I managed to say. "You're right, I'm sorry." But he didn't sound sorry. He sounded curious. "My name's Marcus." I didn't want to tell him my name. Didn't want to have a conversation with this stranger on a dark bus in the middle of the night. But something about his directness, his refusal to pretend everything was normal, made me respond. "Sarah, if you're still with me, still listening to this crazy story, I need to ask you for a favor. Please subscribe to this channel. I know everyone asks, but I'm trying to build something here, a place where people can share their real stories, their messy truths. Your subscription actually matters. It helps more than you know." "What are you running from, Sarah?" Marcus asked, and the question was so unexpected, so brutally accurate, that I actually laughed. It was a bitter sound, nothing like the laugh I used to have. "What makes you think I'm running from anything? Everyone on the night bus is running from something," he said. "That's the only reason people take these things. It's cheaper than therapy and darker than a confessional." I studied him for a moment, this strange man with his leather jacket and haunted eyes. "What are you running from?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Everything. Nothing. Does it matter?" He shifted in his seat, turning his body toward me. "Tell me something, Sarah. When was the last time you felt alive?" The question should have offended me, should have made me get up and move to another seat. But instead I found myself actually thinking about it. When was the last time? Before Michael got sick? Before we got married? Before my parents died in that car accident when I was 22? "I don't remember," I admitted, and saying it out loud felt like confessing to a crime. "That's the saddest thing I've heard in a long time," Marcus said. "And I've heard a lot of sad things." The bus droned on through the darkness, and slowly, without really meaning to, I started talking. I told him about Michael, about the cancer, about the way I felt like I was living inside a glass box, where I could see the world but couldn't quite touch it anymore. I told him things I hadn't told my sister, my friends, my therapist, things I'd barely admitted to myself. And he listened. Really listened, not with the pitying expression everyone else had, but with a kind of fierce attention that made me feel like my words actually mattered, like I mattered. "Do you want to know what I think?" he asked when I finally stopped talking. "I think you're afraid, not of dying, but of living, because living means accepting that he's gone and you're still here, and that feels like the ultimate betrayal." His words cut through me like a knife. "You don't know anything about me," I said, but my voice was shaking. "Maybe not, but I know what it's like to be stuck, to feel like you're watching your own life from the outside, like you're already dead, but your body hasn't figured it out yet." The bus suddenly swerved, and Marcus grabbed my arm to steady me. His hand was warm, strong, and when I looked down at where his fingers wrapped around my wrist, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Something electric and terrifying and completely inappropriate. He must have felt it too, because he pulled his hand back quickly, but his eyes stayed locked on mine. "Sorry," he muttered. The bus driver announced we'd be making a stop at a rest area in 20 minutes. Most of the other passengers were asleep, their heads lolling against the windows or their neighbors' shoulders. We were cocooned in our own little world at the back of the bus, surrounded by darkness and the low hum of the engine. I want to pause here for a second because I know some of you are listening to this and thinking about your own stories, your own pain. If this is resonating with you, if you're finding yourself nodding along or seeing yourself in my experience, please subscribe. It means we're building a community here, a place where people can be real, where we don't have to pretend everything is fine. "Do you believe in fate?" Marcus asked suddenly. "Like, do you think we're supposed to meet certain people at certain times?" "I don't know what I believe anymore," I said honestly. "I used to believe in a lot of things, love, marriage, happily ever after, but life has a way of destroying your beliefs. Or maybe it destroys the wrong beliefs so you can find the right ones," he said. The bus pulled into the rest stop, and the driver announced a 15-minute break. People began to stir, stretching and gathering their things to head inside. Marcus stood up and looked down at me. "Come on," he said. "Let's get out of this metal coffin for a few minutes." I should have said no, should have stayed in my seat, kept my distance, remembered that I was a widow, that I was grieving, that getting involved with a strange man on a night bus was possibly the worst idea I'd ever had. But I didn't say no. I stood up and followed him. The rest stop was one of those depressing roadside places with flickering lights and a smell of old coffee and cleaning products. Marcus bought 2 cups of terrible coffee and we stood outside in the parking lot, watching moths circle the fluorescent lights. "I have a confession," he said, not looking at me. "I saw you at the station before I got on the bus. You were standing there with this look on your face like you were trying to decide whether to get on or just keep walking into the night. And I thought, that woman is about to do something dramatic." I turned to stare at him. "So you..." What? Followed me onto the bus? I know how it sounds, but I couldn't shake the feeling that you needed someone. Or maybe I needed someone. Maybe we both did. He finally looked at me, and there was something vulnerable in his expression that made my chest ache. My wife left me 3 months ago. Took the kids, the house, everything. Said I was too broken, too damaged from my time in the military. Said she couldn't fix me and she was tired of trying. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. Don't be. She was right. I am broken. But sitting here with you, talking to you, it's the first time in months I've felt like maybe broken isn't the same as worthless. The air between us felt charged, dangerous. I knew I should walk away, get back on the bus, put distance between myself and this man who made me feel things I had no right to feel. But I didn't move. We should probably get back, I said weakly. Probably. But neither of us moved. And then, I don't know who moved first, but suddenly his hand was touching my face, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone, and I was leaning into it like a flower turning toward the sun. It was wrong. It was too soon. It was a betrayal of Michael's memory and everything we'd built together. But it also felt like coming back to life after months of being numb. If you're still listening, I need you to understand something. I'm not proud of what happened next. I'm not trying to justify it or make it sound romantic. But I'm trying to be honest, brutally honest, about what grief and loneliness can make you do. And if you can handle that honesty, if you want to hear more real stories like this, please hit that subscribe button. I promise you won't regret it. Sarah, he said, my name rough in his mouth, I think we should... The bus horn blared, loud and insistent. The driver was calling everyone back. The spell between us broke, and we stepped apart, both of us breathing hard like we'd been running. We got back on the bus without speaking. The other passengers filed in around us, oblivious to the tension crackling between Marcus and me. As the bus pulled back onto the highway, he reached over and took my hand. Just held it, his fingers laced through mine, his thumb tracing small circles on my palm. I should have pulled away, but I didn't. For the next hour, we sat there in the darkness, holding hands like teenagers, not speaking, barely breathing. Every point of contact between us felt like it was burning. I kept thinking about Michael, about our wedding day, about the promises I'd made, till death do us part. But death had parted us, and now what? Was I supposed to be alone forever? Was I supposed to let myself wither away in memory of someone who was gone? Tell me something about him, Marcus said quietly. Your husband. What was he like? The question surprised me, but I found myself answering. He was kind, really genuinely kind, which is rarer than people think. He was a social worker, spent his days helping people who'd been dealt terrible hands in life. He believed in second chances, in redemption. He would have. I paused, swallowing hard. He would have wanted me to be happy. Then why do you feel so guilty? Because happiness feels like betrayal, I wanted to say. Because every moment I'm not thinking about him feels like I'm erasing him. Because I'm terrified that if I move on, it means what we had didn't matter. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I asked, what about you? Do you feel guilty about your wife? I feel angry, he admitted. Angry that she gave up on me. Angry that I couldn't be what she needed. Angry that I survived Afghanistan when better men didn't. The guilt comes later, in the quiet moments when I'm alone and I realize I'm the common denominator in all my failed relationships. I squeezed his hand. You're not alone right now. He turned to look at me, and in the dim light of the bus, his eyes were impossibly dark. No, I'm not. The bus driver announced that Indianapolis was an hour away. 1 hour until this strange, intense, inappropriate connection would end. 1 hour until I went back to my empty house and my empty life and pretended this night never happened. I don't want this to end, Marcus said, voicing exactly what I was thinking. I know that's crazy. I know we just met, but I don't want to get off this bus and never see you again. My heart was pounding. What are you suggesting? I don't know. Coffee? Breakfast? A conversation in actual daylight where we can see each other clearly and decide if this is real or just two broken people finding comfort in the dark. Before we continue, I need to ask you something. Are you invested in this story? Do you want to know what I decided? If the answer is yes, then please subscribe. These stories don't get told unless people like you support them. Your subscription helps me continue sharing, continue being honest about the messy, complicated parts of life that nobody wants to talk about. I wanted to say yes. Every cell in my body was screaming yes. But then I thought about walking into a diner with this man, sitting across from him in the harsh light of morning, and seeing the reality instead of the fantasy we'd built in the darkness. What if the magic disappeared? What if I was just using him to escape my grief? What if I was being unfair to both of us? I need to think, I said finally. This is all happening so fast, and I'm not sure I can trust my own judgment right now. I understand, he said, but I could hear the disappointment in his voice. He squeezed my hand one more time, then let go. The loss of his touch felt like a physical ache. We spent the rest of the journey in silence, but it was different from the silence at the beginning. This was heavy with unsaid things, with possibilities hanging in the air like smoke. I kept stealing glances at him, memorizing his profile, the way his jaw clenched and unclenched, the scar above his eyebrow. When the bus finally pulled into the Indianapolis station, it was almost 3 a.m. The city was quiet, just a few scattered cars and the lonely glow of streetlights. We stood up together, gathered our things, and filed off the bus with a handful of other passengers. On the platform, we stood facing each other, neither of us sure what to say. The magic of the dark bus was fading in the fluorescent lights of the station, but something was still there, hovering between us. "My number," Marcus said, pulling out his phone. "I'm going to give you my number, not because I expect you to call, but because I need you to have the option. I need to know that if you decide you want to see where this goes, you can reach me." I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and added his contact information. Marcus, just his first name, followed by a number that might change everything or mean nothing at all. "Thank you," I said, "for tonight, for listening, for making me feel human again, even if it was just for a few hours." "Sarah," he said, and something in the way he said my name made me look up at him. "I need you to know something. What I felt tonight, what I feel right now, it's not just about two lonely people finding each other in the dark. There's something here, something real, and I think you feel it too." I did. God help me, I did. But feeling something and acting on it were two different things. "I have to go," I said, because if I stood there any longer, I would do something I might regret, or something I might not regret, which was somehow more terrifying. He nodded, stepped back, and I walked away. Every step felt like I was leaving something precious behind, but I kept walking. Through the station, out to the parking lot where I'd left my car, into the driver's seat where I sat with my hands on the steering wheel, not moving. I could still feel where his hand had held mine, could still smell his scent on my clothes, could still hear his voice saying my name like it meant something. The drive home was a blur. I kept checking my phone at red lights, half expecting a text from him, half terrified that one would come. But my phone stayed silent. The streets were empty at this hour, and I felt like the only person alive in the entire city. When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked exactly the same as when I'd left. Same porch light Michael had installed 2 years ago. Same garden that I'd been neglecting since his death. Same everything. But I felt different. Like something inside me had shifted, cracked open, let in a sliver of light. I know what you're thinking. You're wondering what I did next. Did I text him? Did I go to bed and try to forget the whole thing? Did I feel guilty, relieved, confused? The answer is all of the above. If you want to know what happened after that night, if you want to hear the rest of this story, you need to subscribe. I promise I'll tell you everything, but I need to know there are people out there who actually care about these messy, complicated truths. Inside the house, everything was exactly as I'd left it. Michael's favorite mug was still in the dish rack. His jacket still hung by the door. Pictures of us smiled from every wall, frozen in happier times. I stood in our living room, in our home, and for the first time since his death, I felt like an intruder. I went to our bedroom, lay down on his side of the bed like I'd been doing for months, and closed my eyes. But instead of Michael's face, I saw Marcus's. Instead of memories of my husband, I thought about a stranger's hand holding mine in the dark. And I felt guilty. So incredibly guilty. Like I'd cheated. Even though technically I hadn't done anything wrong. We'd just talked, held hands, shared a moment. But it felt like more. It felt like I'd betrayed every promise I'd made, every tear I'd cried, every moment of grief I'd suffered through. I pulled out my phone and looked at his contact. Marcus. Just one word, one name, and I could change everything. Or I could delete it and try to pretend tonight never happened. My finger hovered over the delete button. This would be so much easier if I just erased him, went back to my comfortable grief, my familiar pain. At least grief was simple. At least with grief, I knew who I was. The widow. The woman who lost her husband. The tragic figure everyone pitied. But if I called Marcus, if I explored this thing between us, who would I become? The woman who moved on? The woman who replaced her dead husband? The woman who chose life over loyalty to a memory? I couldn't do it. I couldn't delete his number, but I also couldn't call him. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. The days after that night were strange. I went to work, taught my classes, graded papers, attended meetings. I went through all the motions of normal life. But inside, I was at war with myself. One part of me kept reliving every moment on that bus, every word Marcus said, every touch. The other part was screaming that I was a terrible person, that Michael deserved better, that I should be ashamed. A week passed, then two. My sister called to check on me, said I sounded different, better somehow. Like you're actually here, she said. Like you've come back a little bit. I wanted to tell her about Marcus, about the night bus, about the impossible decision I was facing. But how could I explain it without sounding callous, without making it seem like Michael didn't matter, like our love didn't count? I kept my phone with me constantly, checking it obsessively even though Marcus never texted. Why would he? I'd walked away. I'd made my choice. But somehow, knowing his number was there, knowing I could reach out if I wanted to, it made me feel less alone. One night, 3 weeks after that bus ride, I was sitting in bed, unable to sleep as usual, when I finally typed out a message. Just 3 words. I miss you. My finger hovered over the send button. Did I miss him? Or did I miss the way he made me feel? Miss the person I'd been for those few hours, someone alive and present instead of numb and broken. I deleted the message without sending it. But the next night I typed it again. And the night after that. Each time I almost sent it. Each time I chickened out. Before I tell you what finally happened, I need to ask you something. If you were in my position, what would you do? Would you reach out to Marcus, take a chance on something new even though your heart was still broken? Or would you delete his number, honor your husband's memory, stay in your grief? I really want to know. Comment below and tell me. And while you're there, please hit that subscribe button. This story isn't over, and I need to know people actually care about what happens next. It was Michael's birthday when I finally made my decision. I'd gone to the cemetery like I did every week, brought fresh flowers, sat by his grave and talked to him like he could hear me. I told him about work, about my sister, about the leak in the kitchen sink I still hadn't fixed. Normal things, safe things. But then I told him about Marcus, about the night bus, about feeling alive for the first time in months, about the guilt that was eating me alive. And as I sat there talking to a gravestone, I realized something. Michael wasn't there. He was gone. And I could sit by his grave for the rest of my life, could dedicate every remaining day to honoring his memory, and he would still be gone. The question wasn't whether I was betraying Michael by moving forward. The question was whether I was betraying myself by standing still. I pulled out my phone, found Marcus's contact, and before I could change my mind, I typed, "Coffee? If the offer still stands." My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. 3 minutes passed, then 5, then 10. Maybe he'd changed his mind. Maybe he'd met someone else. Maybe he'd realized I was too damaged, too complicated, too much trouble. Then my phone buzzed. "Tomorrow?" 10 a.m.? There's a place called Morrison's on 5th Street. Best coffee in the city. I stared at the message, at this concrete plan, this real next step, and I typed back, I'll be there. That night, I barely slept. I kept second-guessing myself, kept thinking about backing out, kept wondering if I was making a terrible mistake. But when morning came, I got up, got dressed, and drove to Morrison's. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table by the window. In the daylight, he looked different. More real, more human, less like a fantasy I'd conjured on a dark bus. He was wearing jeans and a simple blue shirt, and when he saw me, his face lit up with a smile that made my knees weak. "You came," he said, standing up as I approached. "I almost didn't," I admitted, sitting down across from him. "But you did. That's what matters." He signaled the waitress and ordered us both coffee. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "You're scared." "Terrified," I agreed. "This feels like jumping off a cliff without knowing if there's water below or just rocks." "Then we'll jump together," he said. "And whatever happens, at least we won't be jumping alone." We talked for 3 hours that morning, about our marriages, our losses, our fears, about what we wanted from life and what we were afraid to want. It wasn't romantic in the traditional sense. It was raw and honest and sometimes painful, but it was real. And somewhere in those 3 hours, I realized something. I wasn't replacing Michael. I couldn't if I tried. What he and I had would always be part of me, always be important. But that didn't mean I had to stop living. It didn't mean I couldn't open myself up to new connections, new possibilities, new versions of myself. "So what now?" Marcus asked as we finally prepared to leave. "Do we do this again? See where it goes?" "I think we have to," I said. "I think we owe it to ourselves to find out if this is something real or just two broken people trying to feel whole." He walked me to my car, and before I got in, he pulled me into a hug. It was the first time anyone had held me since Michael died, and I didn't realize how much I'd needed it until his arms were around me. I let myself cry, let myself feel the grief and the guilt and the tiny spark of hope all at once. "Thank you," I whispered against his shoulder. "For what?" "For reminding me that I'm still here, that I still get to have a story." So here's where I am now. Marcus and I have been seeing each other for 2 months. It's complicated and messy, and sometimes I still feel guilty. Sometimes I still cry for Michael, still miss him with an ache that takes my breath away. But I'm also learning that it's possible to hold grief and hope in the same heart, to honor the past while being open to the future. I don't know if Marcus and I will last. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. Maybe we're just helping each other heal so we can eventually find something more permanent with other people. Or maybe we're building something that will last. I honestly don't know. But what I do know is this. I'm alive. Really, truly alive for the first time in months. And that feels like a betrayal some days and a miracle on others. So I'm asking you, what would you do in my place? Am I wrong to move forward? Should I have stayed in my grief longer, honored Michael's memory more completely? Or is it okay to choose life, even when choosing life feels like choosing to leave someone behind? Tell me what you think. Comment below. Share your own stories of loss and moving forward. Let's build a community where we can talk about these impossible decisions, these messy truths that nobody wants to admit. And please, if this story moved you, if it made you think, if it made you feel less alone in your own complicated journey, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter. Your stories matter. And together, we can create a space where it's okay to be human, to be flawed, to be figuring it all out as we go. What would you do in my place? I really want to know.